Hello, everyone. Welcome to Equal's first ever virtual roundtable. Today, we'll be talking to leading experts about why post-secondary education is important for students facing poverty. At Equal Nonprofit, we work to support students in higher education through our scholarships and mentorship programs and spread awareness on the issue of student homelessness. In recent years, student homelessness has become a growing concern, and your perspectives on today's topic will be especially valuable in helping others understand this issue in depth. So to begin, let's meet our panelists and have them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Don Burns. I'm the founder of the Burns Institute for Poverty Research at the Colorado Center on Law and Policy.
Hi, I'm Michelle McHenry Edrington. I'm a medical case manager with Colorado Health Network, and I've worked with Don in the past a great deal.
Hello, I'm Barbara Schneider. Very nice to meet all of you. You are not anybody that I have on my radar screen. So this is really great. New faces, new people. I'm a professor in the College of Education and Department of Sociology at Michigan State University. And the transition to post-secondary education, especially for young people who are economically disadvantaged. And also, I now believe that the new acronym is URM, Underrepresented Racial Minorities. So that's what I do. That's what all my work has been about. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Fox Rubin, and I live in the western slope of Colorado. I'm a social entrepreneur, and right now I'm working primarily on housing equity in the region between Parachute and Aspen, where we have about 55 mobile home parks and around 3,000 residents who live in these parks. And it's a very segregated community we have out here.
Good afternoon. My name is Kerry Renick. I serve as the state coordinator for homeless education with the Colorado Department of Education. So I ensure that the federal McKinney-Vento Act is implemented and carried out in all of our PK through 12 educational settings. But we know that it doesn't stop there. So I also have under my umbrella the single points of contact, or the SPOCs, at universities who go on to assist students experiencing homelessness or highly mobile students in the post-secondary setting as well.
Good day. I'm Leanne Wheeler. By way of introduction, I am the granddaughter of Rosa Esther Lewis Clements and the daughter of Esther Mae Clements Wheeler. And I want to acknowledge that we are conducting this entire event on stolen land. I am the principal of Wheeler Advisory Group. It's a management consultant business that works in the space of legislative advocacy and education. I am a self-described hardcore volunteer. I have sat on a number of boards and commissions over the years, specifically related to the unhoused and homeless issues in the Denver metro area.
All right, thank you all for coming here today to share your opinion on the importance of post-secondary education. Throughout this roundtable, we will be posing 8 to 10 questions that you all can then share your opinions on and discuss. We will begin with the following question. So in your experience, how important do you think a college education is in present society?
So first, I think that we cannot underestimate the impact of what a post-secondary education degree, whether it be an associate's degree, a technical degree, or a 4-year college career degree, affords people with respect to their earnings, their health, and the possibilities for advancement in their jobs. And this is an area that I feel very strongly about, and I worry lots of times when people say, well, my child really isn't college material. That is not something that we need to have in this conversation, because the reality is that with the amazing changes that have occurred in our society, with the importance of scientific literacy, mathematical literacy, knowledge, global society, and the kinds of career opportunities that are going to be available in the future, regardless of what people say about the cost of a post-secondary education, regardless of what people say about, oh, what's it useful for, the reality is that the symbol of that diploma does represent and offer you a ticket to a different lifestyle that you would not have had without it. And I think that one of the things that we learn too is that people that are incarcerated, they also want to achieve these kinds of degrees simply because of the fact that increasingly people start to learn to understand this is a ticket for social mobility, and we can't underscore the importance of it.
That's awesome.
I have a different take that I want to fold in to the conversation. I happen to believe that in an intelligent, informed society is a healthy and capable society. And it is for that reason that I don't believe in price gouging post-secondary education. That's first. Second, when we make education, as critical as it is to a well-functioning society, cost prohibitive for all in society to participate, then what we've done is introduce an inequity along a classes line that we see unfolding before us every day between the upper 1% and everyone else. And so I do believe that post-secondary education is critical to the functioning society. And because it is, that it should be treated like K through 12 is treated. And funded and available for any and everyone who would want to participate. Having an AAS degree and a BS degree and an MS degree has served me. What I'll share that I didn't share as part of the earlier introduction, it did not make me immune to the economic downturn, however, in 2008. And ultimately, I found myself unemployed and unhoused. So I had 3 degrees, and yet, given the financial malfeasance of those who would be in charge of money, I found myself in a condition I wasn't expecting. And in that condition, those degrees did not serve me. What they did do was help me navigate processes and systems, and then ultimately stand up my own small business to help those processes and systems get better at what they do. So I would encourage every child, and I would encourage society as a whole to invest in every child reaching a post-secondary education status. There's 3 things I want to hit on, and then I'll take my seat with them. There's certainly the wage discussion, but we have an entire different discussion that we need to have about how we value labor in this country. So living wage is the minimum, and it shouldn't require debt in order to achieve a living wage. So we're doing that part wrong. Second, it helps when you find yourself in another forum to create networks with people you wouldn't otherwise know. I have relationships from people that I took classes with 30, 35 years ago that I can reach in and tap for coffee, to talk about the next big thing to be working on to solve societal ills. And then the last thing that I think post-secondary education serves is just a personal growth and development and enrichment. It opens up the entire world to you, not just this country. And I believe that a lot happens in our society because our society isn't educated on things that are global, that are unique to our history and country, that are unique to a society evolving versus devolving. And so with that, I'm complete, and we'll take my seat.
Okay. Can I go next?
You're going to be a hard one to follow, Leanne.
Can I take a turn? Okay. I used to believe that education was the only way out years ago, but so many things have changed. Trade schools and other things. I've seen people who don't have college degrees but have a trade live better than people who do have a college degree. I think it also depends on where you live. And I think there needs to be some changes in secondary education, just like 1 through 12, because as a veteran with disabilities, it's not equal. You go to the service, you come back with a disability, and the disability departments at schools don't get it. They don't understand how disabilities work. So there a whole lot of people get knocked out or give up because you don't have the energy to fight to go to school. And I would like more education. I can't afford it. And I'll share with you that for 2 years I was without a roof, and I finished my degree at the University of Colorado without even having a laptop. And so it's very, very difficult, but unless some major changes are made, it's going to continue to be just as difficult as it is now.
Yeah. So as my role as a state employee, I have opinions, but it is more effective if I present data and research to stay even keeled in my role. So today I have done a little bit of digging. And so I'd like to, in the chat, just not kind of harp too much on some things that I found, but just highlight data and statistics that have kind of that are affiliated with your questions. So I'm going to share the Colorado Workforce Development Council has created this talent pipeline report that gives a beautiful summary of really what both of you have hit on. It's not just the college piece, but any type of post-secondary credential or degree. And what they've stated is that 62.6% of jobs in Colorado are going to require some type of post-secondary credential or degree. And Colorado ranks 48th out of 50 in available jobs for high school graduates or dropouts, so without any post-secondary. So we're bottom of the barrel right now. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to drop just in the chat some research that's been done about homeless education, post-secondary options from Shape and Hall out of Chicago, if many of you are aware of them. Phenomenal research. And then Bellwether Education has put together a lot of great research around education as well.
I'd love to weigh in a little on, and I want to say thanks for everyone, what you've already said, and I agree with it. I'd like to add that there's a piece of the puzzle around the so-called gig economy and the skills that can help people succeed in the gig economy. But I think there's a myth, and I think a big problem is going to be how racism plays a role in that economy. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how to grapple with it, but I see employers trying to push benefits away from their employees, put them onto these projects. And so people that excel in developing skills and credentials that allow them to win a project will probably do okay, but then they're not going to have health insurance. And some of those jobs that I think those 65% that require a post-secondary education, I think that's part of the dilemma. And so I like to think, okay, college education is not essential, but post-secondary of some level, some skills. Like in my case, I went to a trade school to be a mechanic right out of high school. And my college counselors told me, don't go to college. My high school counselors like, don't go to college, you should be a mechanic. And I really wanted to do more. And so I took that mechanic job after trade school, went to CU Boulder where I barely got in. and then decided, wow, this isn't that hard. I busted my ass. I'm getting straight A's. And then the faculty there were like, you should go to graduate school. You could, so I bought the myth of the academic path up, but I left my working class roots behind. And I sort of feel like an imposter in the middle class world. I'm very middle class right now, but I keep waiting for my next job to be working class, where I think ultimately I'll be most comfortable. And I sort of feel like the millennials that are getting sucked into the gig economy, they might not finish their educational path because they'll get onto a project. And project-based learning is great, but where are they going to be 5 years in when they've jumped from a few projects? They haven't built any equity to buy a house. They're renting. And I see Colorado is kind of one of the forefront states in that. We have such an educated workforce. And in the rural resort communities out here, there are so many dead-end service jobs. Back to your point about wages. The wages just they've stagnated, if not gone down over the years, and largely filled by immigrants. And so that piece of Colorado, I think, how do we meet our immigrants where they're at, bring them up with skills that are meaningful, and think of jobs that make sense in resort economies. And I know it's not the metro area where you might have more job mobility, but there are some great trade jobs out here that I think Michelle mentioned it. A good trade job can give you a lifestyle and a quality of life, and very smart people are in the trades. So that myth of college and post-secondary equals intelligence also needs to be broken. So I'm sorry to go on so long, but such an amazing topic.
All right, perfect. Thank you all for your contributions. Our second question, a lot of you have already touched on it slightly, but if you'd like to answer, the second question is, do you think that a college degree impacts financial stability? Anyone is free to answer.
I'm sorry, Bithia. I wanted to respond to the first question before we get to the second one. And I just realized I was on mute. Please forgive me. First of all, I want to say hi to everybody. And John and Leanne and Michelle are very much a part of a recent book about journeys out of homelessness. And I'm delighted to see you and Kerry also. I think there's a certain danger in asking this question this way. Of course, a college education is important, but we tend, and clearly everybody on the panel has a post-secondary training of some kind. However, there is a great tendency on the part of all of us who have post-secondary training to otherize people who don't. And I think that's very much a part of one of the tragedies of our society, that we tend to consider people who are not like us unworthy. And I just want to make sure as we talk about this that we don't think that people without some kind of post-secondary training are somehow less than we are. For example, I have two stepsons, neither of whom went to college or got any kind of post-secondary training. They are great guys, and they're doing very important work. And so I think there's a danger that we, as I said, otherize folks who haven't had the advantages that we have.
Can I say something before we move on? I don't want us to leave out the problem of racism. You can have 5 degrees, but if depending on where you live, people aren't going to hire you if you don't look like them. And people treat you differently, and some people give up because they feel they've earned all of this education and they're not fulfilling themselves. And that's when people fall into jobs that they can do but not jobs that they love. And I've experienced this here in Colorado. When I came here, I had a paralegal degree. I couldn't get hired, and an attorney told me, no one's going to hire you because you're Black. And this was my friend who told me that. So education, you know, it's not everything. It's very important, but depending on who you are, who's in control, and where you live, that will determine how efficient your education can be used.
Can I, am I allowed to just, okay, so I think that I really appreciate all of the comments that have been made in ways that you probably don't know because you don't know all about my work and where I am and what I do. And I want to start with Leanne because I was fully behind case 16 during the Clinton administration. I never gave up on that. I felt really strongly that we have to look at this as a system for everybody. And the reason that I want to highlight that, because this speaks to Don and everyone else as well, is that when I think about education today, I think about it for the future. I can't think about it any other way. My family lives in Colorado. I have grandchildren in Colorado. I have to think about it for where we're going to be, not where we are right now. And again, I want to support something that Leanne said about what kind of people are we going to be? What kind of people are going to participate in civil society? What kind of people are we that are not going to embrace each other and see each other as one humanity that we have to work on together? If we don't think about that for the future and understand how quickly the world is changing and how globally things are looking, that we're going to miss too much of an opportunity that we have right now, which is to try and think about, you can't learn everything you need to know by finishing a high school diploma. You just can't. That the amount of information that you have to learn, the technology you have to get under your belt, the opportunities you have to have about understanding even disease, looking for what's going to happen in terms of your water supplies, how the environment is going to affect what you eat. It's so much a part of who we are and the children you're going to have or the people you're going to, we have to think ahead. We have to envision our world. We've got a little helicopter flying around Mars. We are not in, and horrible as it is, and terrible as racism is, and all of the problems about not being hired and racial discrimination about because of what color you are or what your background is or how you're dressed is a problem. But we can't stand there. We have to figure out a way forward. And for me, that way forward is supporting more education for the future so that we start on a much more equal level playing field. And to that end, I have dedicated all of my efforts on trying to help young people that are in low income and minority schools learn about what kind of careers are out there, how much money you can earn if you get one of those careers, where you have to go to school to get it, what kind of education you're going to need. And not just that 4-year diploma, because that's hardly fair for anybody, but to kind of to envision where things are. It used to be that if you were in the security and police department, you could take those jobs outside of high school. If you think that's going to be the future today, that's not going to happen. And I think what happened yesterday tells us so much about what's going to have to happen in all of the kinds of ways that we deal with police security for our future, if we're going to have a future. So I want to say that I really appreciate all of the things that people have said. I'm very much against gouging this education. I think that the problem that happened in California with people buying their way into college has helped, because the exposure of that says a lot about the inequality that we're envisioning. And for me, I have to stand firm on my understanding. Let's do this for the future. Let's do this for the future of our children. Let's give them the opportunities and the chances that everybody should have. And that's where I'm coming from.
I've got 1 second. I'd like to add thank you for all that you've said. And I trust Kerry will have this data. Unless we get to a place where every single child has access to education, the same quality education, 40 years from now, 60 years from now. So I'm a software engineer, system engineer, and I've got an electronics engineering degree. I think Kerry will have some data or get access to data, because Black women in this country are the single most educated demographic in this country. Yet we make 68 cents on the dollar. And so we've got to look at all of it. There's at least 4 dimensions, maybe even 6, that we need to be looking at in order to ensure that every single heartbeat in society has access, that education looks like what sets a fire to their belly, and how that might serve where we're headed. I've got 22 years in defense, and so some of the work I've done has served us being on Mars right now. Work I did 20 years ago served. So I certainly principally understand where we have to absolutely be looking to the future. But without equity, without living wage opportunity, without public health and safety for every heartbeat that walks these lands, then we aren't really tending to the future. We have to tend to that now, even as we are looking over the horizon as to what's coming down the pike 3-4 generations from now. Then I also want to add this, and it's interesting. My mom just said last night that with every generation we get smarter, but we get weaker. And I asked her to expound on that. She just said that was just something that she heard. So full disclosure, I'm in my 50s. My mother's marching toward 80. She heard this as a young woman. And I got to thinking about the differences that we're seeing with regard to the gig economy John had shared. When this system was set up, there was an expectation you're going to get married. The laws say so. You're going to have children. That's what the laws say. Our entire work structure is set up for patriarchy and leadership in patriarchy, and the matriarchy tending to the home. I mean, the systems that we've set up was for that model. And it's largely still that way. I mean, there are some offshoots, and we do some work around, end around flank stuff in order to ensure that you know, we're educating the girls too, and we're doing all this. We still largely are working to an antiquated system to include education, where we still insist on folks being in a room and facing forward, and someone facilitating at the front of that room. When we look worldwide on how other countries educate, it doesn't always look like what we're seeing. But my point is this: young people now, to my how they occur for me, aren't signing up for that. They aren't signing up for the married. They're not signing up for the kids. They're not signing up to go into debt on mortgages and cars even, and buying of homes, where we have set up entire value streams and systems and that say this is how you have to do it. And I don't remember the study, but I'll get it, where there was someone who was paying attention to the generation. So I'm Gen X, where the earlier we were born in the Gen X system, that we were still buying napkins and salt and pepper shakers and expecting to entertain, where generations following Gen X said, well, we can go get happy hour for $5 and entertain each other out there. and we can live downtown and walk there, and we can split the rent 5 ways so that we won't become encumbered. And so I also think, as we're looking toward the future, we've got to stop what occurs for me as a goat rope that says we've got to make all of these other generations come in and do it the way we started doing it in the 50s and 60s and 70s, because it will be true for some. But what I'm seeing is the majority don't want any part of that. So although they may not have what we would call wealth built up, their experiences, they find it wrenching. When they get ready to travel, they do it. And they aren't bogged down by ensuring the bills get paid that we were told we had to have in order to be considered an adult. So I think that we've got so much. I'm so grateful for this conversation. We've got so much to contemplate here, and I'm excited to see young women leading the discussion. So thank you for allowing time and space for the rant. I'm complete with that. But I'm saying seeing such a difference in what people are perceiving to be necessary. And it's got me rethinking. I'll tell you that 16 months being unemployed, not having my stuff, not being housed, taught me some things. And I was not a young woman when that happened. I was in my 40s when that happened. It has me now rethinking some of the things that I bought into as being signs of success, as being, what's critical is being middle class as critical as we think it is. What other ways are there to learn? What other ways are there to be enriched and to become wealthy? I never would have considered any of that until I lost my 6-figure job working in industry. And so with that, I truly am complete. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to be your data guru, Leanne. So whatever you're going to say, I'm going to back it up with some stats, right? So I'm going to lead into, I think you wanted to go to the financial stability, but we have, and this post-secondary conversation is so important, but where we're missing the mark right now is our kids aren't even getting to post-secondary. Less than half of our students experiencing homelessness are even graduating from high school. And that's given 5, 6, 7 years. So we, just in having this conversation, we are leaving out half of our students. And so until we can get to the point that we're at least at state levels of graduation with our students experiencing homelessness, like post-secondary is so far-fetched. The Colorado Action Lab did a recent study with foster care students, and foster care students have an even lower graduation rate than our McKinney students. They're only graduating at 25 to 30%. And so they followed them to students who graduate. So 30% of students are graduating who have been in foster care. Of that 30%, only 30% are going on to post-secondary. And of that 30%, like only 15% even go on to year 2. So it is this like incredible dynamic that if we're not getting into kids, graduating high school, and then you go on to ask about financial stability, the median wage, that living wage a person has to make right now to support a significant other and a child is $25.88. And without any type of post-secondary training, that's not going to happen. And those are probably in the lower, right, reduced rent areas of our state. So we're missing the mark even from the get-go.
Are unconventional post-secondary education paths, such as trade school, just as valuable as the traditional ones? Anyone can start.
And I want to come back to something that Kerry was just talking about. It seems to me that one of the factors involved in this whole conversation is that college education will increase your wages. And the real problem, seems to me, is that many people without post-secondary training, and even those who are going to trade school, don't make enough money to really get by and have a satisfactory living situation. One of the things about the Denver area, for example, is what the National Low Income Housing Coalition calls a housing wage, which is how much do you have to make an hour to be able to afford an average 2-bedroom housing unit. Well, in Denver, it's over $30 an hour. And many jobs, including those jobs that are trained for in trade schools, they're making $14, $15, $16 an hour. And some of those folks are in fact experiencing homelessness because they simply don't make enough money. So I would argue, yes, trade school training is very valuable for those who want to do trade school. I also very much agree with Leanne that we ought to make post-secondary college education available free of charge for everybody to equalize that. But we also have to make sure that we provide a living wage, which means being able to afford housing for everybody. I didn't mean for that to be a conversation stopper.
This is Michelle. I think that trade schools are very, very important. And I look at places like the military, they send you to trade school. And what does the military do? It protects the country. So it depends on what you do. What I did in the military, I don't want to do out in the real world. But trade schools, I think, are very, very valuable if you have options to use that education the way that you want. And that the things that you deem necessary are affordable and you have access to it. Because I've heard you can have all the degrees in the world, but if you don't know how to communicate or you don't have a job, what good is that education?
I'll just add one thing. I recall taking wood shop and metal shop and home ec and sort of all these other kinds of classes. I don't even know if they're still offered. And as an Air Force veteran, also went to a very long trade school where I ultimately ended up with this 2-year degree in electronic principles engineering. And what I've come to understand over the years is my investment in other people to fix the things that I did not know how to fix myself. So if my commode went out, my brakes went out, my hot water heater went out, I had to call somebody to come in to fix that because I did not have a skill set to fix that myself. Now, what's good about the common era is that there are now YouTube videos and and sort of these other ways to get to a place where you can tinker until it gets serious enough that you have to call in the pro. Our infrastructure, I think, is largely reliant not only on the engineering but the maintenance side of the education, the trade school side. I think it's a hand in glove relationship. I don't know that one is more significant or less significant than any other. Although I did have a plumber say to me once, "What good is your systems engineering or your software engineering degree when your toilet stops flushing
Mhm.
if you don't know how to fix that problem.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I had to acknowledge, yeah, you are the wiser of the two of us in this moment, and handed over my money and let him fix my toilet. But I think that that they are a hand in glove. It's equally important. And why can't we all get to, I think, with education, this whole totality, again, informing society? I shouldn't have to, it shouldn't be an either or proposition, nor should I, it goes back to the othering that Don spoke to in classism. We have a certain thing that we feel about the guy or gal that shows up to change out the water heater versus the person who's writing maybe code or command and control systems and instrumentation that now is literally on Mars, right? So it's something that we ought to tend to, but they are in fact equally important.
Can I just ask a question? Because on this particular question, lots of times people will make the comparison. Well, I know people that are earning a living wage by doing X, Y, and Z. I think it's very important, as Kerry has said, that people understand what these labor markets look like nationally and what they look like locally, and that what that really means. It's sort of, when Bill Gates said, I didn't go to college. Well, that isn't really exactly so. And what he was actually doing in terms of learning, and the numbers of billionaires that we have that didn't go to college is really very, very tiny. So, and there's all kinds of data that you can find on all of this. So I feel that it is really a question of getting a stronger handle on the data, understanding what the data are. But Kerry, it seemed to me you raised something that at least for me, was a heart stopper. And that's the fact of the proportion of young people that are not getting out of high school. Whether they are in, homeless or otherwise, this is just criminal. It seems to me that of all the things that have come up, you can't even start to talk about a post-secondary education until you can get these students to degree, to some kind of a high school diploma. They have no opportunity for any kind of work, because even the most menial jobs that we have in our society right now, they won't hire you even a high school diploma. I'm really concerned that the numbers that you gave are just really just frightening to me, because that suggests that the real, at least for me, the real conversation here is, well, what's the preparation? What kind of preparation are we giving the children of Colorado to be able to have a future for themselves? And how can we change that? And how can we facilitate a different preparation process which gets them through that high school diploma? That is, at least from my sense, I mean, you're already looking at, what is it, like 35 to 40% of people that are going to be on your welfare rolls. That's going to diminish any kind of revenue status that the state has. It's going to diminish any kind of things that you can build for infrastructure. That's going to just change entirely the whole budgetary system of the state if you are supporting so many people, either through, health, housing, whatever. So my concern for all of you, and I want to talk to my daughter about this, who's president of her PTO. I mean, really, how really dire is this? Because that really puts you very much at the bottom of the scale, right near Alabama and Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think that, I'm sorry, do you think that education doesn't stand alone? a lot of kids don't go to school because they have to keep siblings at home when they're sick, or a parent can't do something. So until we fix the causes of it, education can't just be the only subject matter.
You nailed it.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's true. However, if in fact we don't work through the schools, we're going to miss too many opportunities to be able to fix these other things.
yeah.
So, for example, in certain places in California, they have what they call these medical trucks that are actually coming to areas where people and kids would not have gotten medical services. So they're operating that. In certain other cities, they have different kinds of home, food repositories, so that you're not going without people that are without food. In other places, they have certain kind of services that are finding low-income housing for people. I don't think that we shouldn't do these other things. Of course, we're going to have to do these other things. Of course, we're going to have to look at that. But we're having a conversation, at least from my perspective right now, about the education. Can we and the Kellogg Foundation, a number of other places, have basically built these care schools that are offering all of these other types of services, especially in low-income communities? There's one that's being developed right now in Detroit, in a lot of other urban areas where, in fact, all of these other kinds of services and needs that people have are, in fact, being supported. And I think that if Colorado were to move into one of these kinds of, they're called zones. The Harlem Children's Zone was one type, but now these other kinds of zones are much more, they're fuller in terms of the kinds of services that they're offering people. That this, to me, seems like the best bet that we have in terms of making a change. I can only do it through the institution that I know at least has an opportunity to save the children, and to save the children right now. Because if we don't save those children, where are they going to be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? We've got to save our children. And to be able to do that, I would really strongly suggest that people move and look more carefully at the zone ideas, because I think that they could be extraordinarily helpful. And Colorado now has one of the largest proportions of incoming people from California in the computer industry. And if that isn't the place to start with these zones of opportunity, that I can't think of a better place, because that is their responsibility. Those are the responsibilities of the tax base, of everything else that has to go towards building these different kinds of communities that make it possible for people to live, to thrive, and to receive an education.
It's one of those chicken or the egg situations, because federal law is set up and established to make sure that students experiencing homelessness are afforded access to education. The difficult piece is that we can't get our kids to school for them to take advantage of what schools do best. So Colorado has a phenomenal post-secondary and workforce department. We offer concurrent enrollment. I mean, kids can graduate with a 2-year degree, a 3-year degree before even graduating from high school. So there are significant opportunities available to those who are physically present in the school building. But like you said, there are such extenuating circumstances that prevent students from even coming to school. And so if we're going to rally resources, I absolutely agree, bringing the resources to the communities, but those communities are one of the big determinants of whether a student's going to thrive in school and move on to post-secondary settings and education. And so I welcome a longer conversation. Dream big with me, please. I am here to change the world and make things a better place and really get our kids graduated from high school, because 375% less likely that they will ever enter the poverty cycle if they can just get a high school diploma.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think plays the biggest roles in affecting a student's decision on going to college? Their counselors, their parents, any other person in their lives? Anyone is free to answer.
I don't think there's a cut and dry answer for this. You know, we can have heroes anywhere. It could be a character on TV. It could be a relative. It could be a neighbor. So I don't think there's a black and white answer, a definitive answer for this question.
I have a thought around, and I agree with that. When we were talking, you mentioned the Kellogg Foundation. I ran a nonprofit in our community for a few years that had figured out this really neat model for early childhood education. And that is, we used buses to go into low-income neighborhoods with bilingual preschool teachers. And we gave free preschool. And the whole idea was to get children set up so that when they show up to kindergarten, they have an experience with education with a warm, kind, loving, culturally appropriate educator, and that they are excited to go to school. Mm-hmm. And in largely immigrant communities, preschool is not in the parents' history. Parents didn't know what it was before they came to this country. And so that program really did kind of change the ideology. We also did it in a 2-generation approach where we worked with the moms on wherever their level of education was and got them up to the community college level, because many of them wanted to take classes. So it was a dyad model where we work with the kids in the preschool bus, but then support the parents. And I think it's changed the culture for a lot of immigrant families that their children are going to college. So back to that piece, I think the parents can play a key role, but you really need all of the systems encouraging that. And I think in our region here, one of the gaps is sort of in middle school, where the system is still wired for the white children to succeed more than the immigrant children. And I'm assuming in Denver it's similar, with a wider range of racial backgrounds and immigrant backgrounds, that the system, in Colorado's 42nd worst in, I call it the race to the bottom in how much we spend on primary education. And it's sad that we haven't figured out how to raise our budget more. But I think you're right, that whole range of the experience, by the time you're in high school and ready to think about that post-secondary college decision, like the fabric needs to be woven every step along the way, because mm-hmm. Second you're homeless, like I was homeless when I was a junior in high school, like college was blown off my radar. It was all about survival. Mm-hmm. But one person made mm-hmm. that difference. He was a high school auto shop teacher that took me in and found a foster family for me. So I was, and they were saying, don't go to college, do that trade school. So it's tricky to know what the right path is, but the culture and back to the racism that's just inherent in our systems, we've got to just, attack it at all forms and really try to understand why it's still there, after all these years. Like, what the heck are we thinking?
It is absolutely a systems approach. There could be that one person that makes the connection with the student and says, hey, have you ever thought about college? And they're like, no, like, what? That's not for me. But one person can be that influencer. But unless we have a system of support set up for students, they're not going to actually get there. Right. So say they've graduated high school and the liaison has done everything they can. They've got them set up with financial aid, housing, everything for August. We have no idea what happened during that summer, that for whatever reason in August, that young person didn't end up at the door of that university. And so until we have a system of support that can be back and be behind these students, that's going to impact whether they actually make it to college or not.
Right.
And we've done this Maslow's kind of hierarchy of needs as it relates to pursuing post-secondary. And so I know all of you are probably familiar, base survival, right? John, you mentioned it, like those that are experiencing immense obstacles, they function in survival-based thinking, right?
Mhm.
So for a counselor to say to them, you can go to college, you can do this, they're like, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about going to work this afternoon. I'm thinking about the fact that my siblings haven't eaten in 2 days.
Mhm.
I'm not hearing your college conversation.
Mhm.
But even if you move up to the next level, right, the safety part of Maslow's, okay, so we got our basic needs now met, but now I'm like, I'm just making sure that this is going to last. I'm going to make sure that I'm in a safe place, that, we're functioning here. It's not until we get up to the third and fourth levels of Maslow's that you can even start to introduce futuristic thinking, goal setting with our young people. But yet, like you said, John, we're functioning at a middle-class white set of values in our education system, that here counselors are taught to just feed them this stuff. You could do it. Here's this application, all of that. And they're like, yeah, I'll take it with me. I'll get it filled out. No, they won't.
Yeah, well, let me just, I have to, I'm sorry, come in here because I've spent 10 years developing the college ambition program for low-income and minority schools. So first, let me answer the question. And the question in all the research says the most important person in helping you decide on a college education are your parents, not the high school counselor. That's the first. The second is that in low-income families where parents have not gone to college at all, many of the students then become their own parents, and the responsibility of getting that information actually falls on the students themselves. This third thing is this idea that the counselor says this. Well, in most cases, most of the counselors, if you look at the data and the studies that have been written, the counselors are not doing college counseling. Essentially, in most of the low-income and minority schools that are throughout the United States, the counselors are, for the most part, doing social and emotional work. They're doing a lot with special education needs. They're doing a lot of things related to alcoholism, drug addiction, suspensions. That's where they're usually spending a great deal of their time. So we are very understaffed with respect to college support, especially in our low-income communities. There, it's just not there. And it is really important to build a stronger base of knowledge so that teachers, parents couldn't come. You have different kinds of activities for parents. You have teachers learning more about what they can do in the classroom, because the reality is that the college idea and what happens in a college program, at least with a college counselor in a high school who may be seeing 250 kids, which is the average, that's just not a reasonable thing. Most middle-class parents that are considering more than the state options for their kids will look to even private sources to help them fill out, which is not an easy way to get, one, financial support, two, to understand where to live, three, to be able to even know what kinds of courses to take so that you don't end up failing them and not getting the credit. All of that information is not known to most kids. And when they get a piece of paper, that you can be assured that they're not going to show up, because when they get that first bill that says how much they have to pay, usually it comes in by June if they've already been accepted, that's it. They're not going, because that bill is one that they can't even understand what their actual financial commitment's going to be. So what I would suggest to everyone here is that the support for college has to be a more holistic support. It has to be a school support. It has to be something that helps you understand that these are the kinds of differences that are now in place. The college application form, absolutely impossible to understand. The U2 kinds of things that are available for kids to understand about college, they're very, what I would call information, not deficit, they're overloaded with information. So navigating the site is really extraordinarily difficult. Therefore, it really means that something very different has to happen within high schools to offer more support to families, especially low-income minority families and first-gen families. Otherwise, there's going to be exactly what you talk about, these kinds of situations where this doesn't make any sense at all. I've got to go to work. I've got to watch my siblings. It's my responsibility to take care of the dinner while my parents are on a night shift. So absolutely, you're right.
All right.
Have
So
there been any, I'm sorry.
you're good.
I was going to ask, are there any studies where people have asked students why they quit or didn't even try to go to college and learn those reasons instead of, us guessing or saying all these things? Has anyone actually did a study and talked to the students?
There are tons of these studies, lots and lots of these studies about why that happens. And the interesting thing about it is if you go to a low-income school and you, in any community, and you ask ninth graders, what are you going to do? And they all tell you they're going to go to college. And they keep that idea about going to college, usually unless they drop out or have difficulty passing their courses, have to take credit recovery. And they're going to keep that idea in their head for a very long time. And the interesting thing is that now we're at a place where it is no longer the case that most kids aren't matriculating to some kind of post-secondary experience. This is the majority overall, they do. So then the question that you're really asking is, why do they drop out? They typically drop out, or they don't think about it as a financial problem. A lot of them can't do it simply because they're really not prepared to be able to take it on. A lot of them do not have the kind of social supports that they need from their teachers, from their counselors, from their schools. The other thing is that their peer groups are sometimes in a very difficult situation. And this is something that we haven't talked at all about. But the peer group structure, especially for the adolescent, in many of our schools that are, replete with violence, bullying, all other kinds of issues that you can't imagine how difficult they are. In places like that, it's very hard to maintain a position for yourself in the academic stream to be able to allow yourself to accrue the grades that you need. So you could get something like 120 kids that'll be an entering class at ninth grade. And then look at the number of kids that'll cross the stage and graduate in June, could be something like an eighth of that class will actually march across the stage, with a lot of the kids taking credit recovery over the summer or having to repeat a course or two in the fall.
Thank you.
I just have one question for
links.
the educators, and then I'm going to take my seat because I know Kerry's coming with the data. At what point, given all that we know, and we've now been doing education this way multi-generationally, we still have the same problems that we've had for generations. And so at what point do we take all of this data and all of this valuable information and simply build a new way to do education versus trying to reform a system that was created only to ever educate white children, and specifically white boys? So we kind of get in a place, I think, where we've assessed, we know it's a bona fide issue. There's a problem here to solve, and we've got great data, but we keep trying to reform a system that was created to do the thing it's been doing. And so who owns, and I'm going to say all of society, but there's typically, somebody's got to be in charge. When do we get to a place where we simply build new ways of educating our society? Question mark, complete question.
I am hopeful. I'm going to hold out hope that the awfulness that COVID has created has also thrown everything out the window and forced our schools to rethink education, how it's provided, the setting, every aspect of it. So I hope that we don't revert back to business as usual when all the dust settles, because we have found that there are a group of students who have been tremendously successful in the remote world for lots of reasons. And so I hope that we continue with options for students to meet this 21st century era that is education. And whether you want to believe all, I don't know how many of you have looked into the study for Ruby Payne and her kind of social class kind of conversations. And I'm not saying that I adopt everything that she has, talked about, but I think there is some truth in what I had mentioned before, that the area, the community by which children are raised and immersed tremendously impacts them, their decisions in education. So students that come from more, a lower socioeconomic neighborhood and background might, even though they have all of the capabilities of going to college, may choose not to because they will, quote, look different. They will be made fun of by their peer group, by their neighborhood, because they are the ones that are trying to break this norm, break out of, what's wrong with being here, what's wrong with. And so I think that it's not just an educational thing. You right. Nailed it. It is a societal shift that has to be made. Yeah.
Can I just throw in a thought? There's this guy named Paulo Freire who is from Brazil, and he ended up becoming the education minister. And he wrote a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And what he came up with this premise that people learn best when they are interested in the subject they are learning. And he proved it by going out into a very rural area and teaching adults how to read and write in Portuguese, the kind of the colonist language, in 45 days. And our primary education system is so incredibly inefficient because it was designed to occupy kids during a time of the day so that their parents could be gainfully employed. And it's gotten worse with two-income, we need two-income families in our economy. And so there's a whole class of schooling called free schooling. There's a school in Massachusetts called the Sudbury Valley School that I studied. And there's a free school in Colorado that I can't remember the name of it, that basically gives the control to the students. And the educators are basically there to support them, not to enforce, right. the curriculum, because the curriculum is designed by the interests of the kids. And I think that back to how do we change these systems and make them possible that schools become education centers, not curriculum centers, forcing us to learn at a pace that in a manner that, and I think you're right, this pandemic has cracked it a little bit, but it's like it's such a dominant force, we tend to fall back to it. And just it just breaks my heart, that piece that Leanne, you said, that 60 Black women are the highest educated and get 68% of the pay for the exact same or better, I might add. And then one last factoid that I heard, and Barbara, you might know the source of this, or Kerry, and it's not really a predictor, but the best connection between a child's education attainment is actually the education attainment of his or her mother. I've heard that and I've seen it in writing, but I couldn't couldn't find the source of it. So I don't know if others have heard that, if you have a source of it, but it makes a lot of sense from everything that I've been experiencing with families I've worked with over the years.
Yeah, you're right, and it's been that way. Well, it used to be, and it used to be the case that it was the father,
Right. It's
and then that changed and to the mother in about the late 70s, and then so I mean this is a continued thing. So it's just about in every one of these models that we build. I'm a quantitative person, so we always put in the mother's education as a variable that would explain something about the social class of what's going on in the home. And it's of course just a variable that gets estimated along with a whole bunch of other variables. So you're absolutely right. And there, you can just go on the internet and just look at it. And and if you do Google Scholar, they'll just come up, many of them. And then it's exactly the same. I want to go back to one thing that Kerry said, and this is my caution. And and I've been very concerned about this. So we have been doing work on what's been happening during COVID and how adaptations have been occurring. One of the things that's very clear, at least, is that there are a number of children that are not thriving in this global Zoom learning environment. In fact, it's more probably the case that most kids are not, and it's falling dramatically on low income, and minority kids are really suffering the most. My worry, of course, is that the consequence of this is we're going to see tremendous learning losses. And then what are we going to do? How are we going to make it up? How are we going to even think about it? What are we going to do in these situations where obviously the teachers need more support, where they desperately need technology in ways that they haven't had it before. The principals have to start thinking about how they're going to expand their days and not having kids in front of Zoom and computers. So that I am not optimistic at all about what the future says about the reorganization of schools. I'm much more concerned about what are we going to do in the fall that's going to help all of these children that have, really been behind a screen, some of them, 5-6 hours a day, where they haven't been able to go outside, they haven't been able to play with their friends, they have, it's been a very difficult situation for so many children that we really have got to think hard about what we're going to offer in the way of an educational experience for young people in the fall. And I think that that's one of the things that the state legislature has really got to take into account. I mean, we've got to pass this infrastructure bill about what we're going to do for our schools, because if the schools don't get support, I can't imagine how this is ever going to have any positive impact on anybody's life. We are really in a very difficult position. I don't think we should be Pollyannish about this. I think that until we start to really recognize this has been a very difficult time for everyone, there's been real implications for people's mental health as well as their physical health. And what are we going to do for our children? I just think we cannot get away from that.
When kids don't do well, is there any group or organization that takes a look at why and try to fix the symptoms of that? Because learning in class is different from video learning. Even in college, I had to learn how to go to school online, and I actually function better than in a classroom. But if kids don't know how to get education over a screen, then they're gonna do badly. And that's not to say they're not smart. They don't know how to adapt their skills to learning in this different way.
So, sorry.
Does somebody else want to answer? I just don't want to put myself up here as some kind of big expert on anything, but please, somebody else, please, on the conversation. John, please.
Okay, I'll Google it.
There's a ton of information from the get-go. Again, I'd go back to those links that, particularly the Bellwether, they have had a number of documents and research on this because it really started initially as an equity issue, right?
Mhm.
So it started as students who are receiving special education services, ELL services, homeless, foster care. I mean, so it really became an equity issue. But what we have seen in the kind of shift in what's being published is very much what you referenced, is that the burnout is real for both teachers, for students. And so now we're like, well, how are we going to continue to educate when everybody is done? And so there is a tremendous amount of research out there about the Zoom fatigue, the online learning and all of that. And I'm not saying that, like, I'm just saying let's consider all options. I hope I try not to be Pollyanna on everything, but I want to hold out hope on some aspects, that if anything can come of this, is that we have a continuum of options, not just one anymore.
Thanks.
We have one final question, and it's more of a closing statement. So since we're nearing the end of the roundtable here, we'll just have each of you share your final statements with anything you think is very important that to be included within the roundtable. Feel free to go ahead in any order.
Okay, I'll go. I think there are a lot of studies out there, but I'm thinking when these studies aren't done, they're not studying the whole person and the whole family. You know, they're studying just one part of it, but the family dynamic is important, and you can't study about education if you don't study that. And kids can't learn if they're hungry. And there's all of these other things. It's not a standalone thing, is what I'm trying to say. There's all of these other things that are connected. And I think sometimes those are being left out.
I absolutely agree. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel to share my expertise in the realm of education. I am going to stand by the belief that education is the pathway out of homelessness. I think that our first step is making sure that those students have access to education and wraparound services and supports, that we can no longer meet needs in siloed approaches, that we have to blend everything, education, housing, basic needs, everything, to make sure that our students and families are supported so that we can make post-secondary options, whether it's a trade school, whether it's a university, it doesn't matter to me, just something that we can make that a reality for them, so that they can go on and be self-sufficient and contributing members of society, and breaking that system and cycle of poverty. We will all be better. We are the best of the least of us, right? Like that quote. And so thank you very much for this opportunity.
And I'd like to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my views about education. And I am so very happy to have met you all, and how much thought you put into it, and being able to bring people together with some very different perspectives. And I just want to end saying once again, there's no question in my mind that we absolutely have to look at our education system, recognize that there's no way we can continue the education system we have without providing more access and opportunity for low-income and minority students to be able to achieve more education in post-secondary education. It will matter for their lives. It will matter for all of our lives.
Mhm.
And that right now we cannot give up on this as an option for people, and we have to help them find the right pathway for themselves. And everybody doesn't have to choose the same pathway,
Right.
but we've got to have opportunity structures that allow people for their interests, the skills that they have, the strengths that they have, and the dreams they want for themselves. Let's not take away their dreams. Let's not
Right.
take away the ways that they can envision themselves, but rather find a way to support that and support that in meaningful educational experiences that will make a difference in their lives.